culverts under the road. They know those culverts and they'll take shelter in there. Okay, so rather than us reaching in to try and pull them out, we need to get the wombat out first and then try to catch it. Okay, because if it hits you with nothing there, it won't do you any damage at all. It's the crushing that's the problem. And look, 40 kilos, that's a fair rock to be hitting against something. So we do need to take it fairly seriously. So if you're going to do a wombat, take your plastic bag with you, so you've got something that might work to shush them out. The other one is if you don't mind filling up a drink bottle or something with some water, they've got a bit of an inbuilt thing about flooding. So sometimes a little squirt on the back side and they go, oh dear, I'm flooding, and they'll come walking out from wherever they are. Okay, so try to take those things with you. The babies are very straightforward, just being aware that even when they're sort of that big, they can give you a good bite, the little babies. Okay, so just be aware of that with the youngsters. And in terms of your rescue tub, you'll need one of the big plastic tubs, obviously for a wombat or a really big pet pack. And I will always tie that up with a ratchet strap or something if I've got a wombat in there. Okay, because again, just very, very strong sort of creatures. So the rest we'd look at the time and can discuss. But obviously, yeah, just need to be... Yeah, no tail to grab on a wombat. Well, there is, but it's only this big, so it doesn't do very much. Any questions on wombats? Beautiful. All right, so look, bandicoots, they're very straightforward. So this is the ones I'm talking about. So those are the two types we've got in Tassie. So the eastern barred on the left, southern brown on the right. The eastern barred, I mean, the main thing we need to know from you is which species it is. So you don't need to remember the names. Basically, does it have stripes on its bum or doesn't it? Okay, and the eastern barred on the left, they are now pretty much only in Tassie. There's one family group on the mainland that was an introduced group that was released there. Then they only remain in Tassie, so they're quite an important one to keep an eye out for. Now have a look at the tail on a bandicoot. Okay, you'll see that's pretty flimsy. Okay, you're not going to be picking that up by the tail, so I mean it's fairly obvious when you can see how small it is. Now, bandicoots, bettongs and potoroos, your chances of catching them are very, very slim if they're mobile. That's basically impossible if they're mobile. So most of the cases we deal with these guys, they are babies or they're incapacitated or they've been brought inside and are contained in a room somewhere. Okay, so you don't really need to know a lot about trying to outsmart them and catch them, because if they're even a little bit mobile, they'll be gone by the time you get there. Okay, every single time. So most of them will be immobile and you just use your same method. Place a towel over them, pick them up and then pop them in the rescue box. Look, bandicoots do okay popped in a pillowcase, so you can put them in a pillowcase just to help them relax a bit. But they're not macropods, so they're not hoppers, so you don't need to put them in a Hessian bag. Okay, just the rescue box is absolutely fine for them. They can give you a gentle bite, but it's nothing too serious. Now, bandicoots, if they have babies, it's very rare that they only have one. Okay, most of the time they'll have at least 3 or 4. They can have up to 6. So again, a common situation is a pet disturbs one in a nest. It takes off and drops a baby. The person calls us for that baby. We're going to ask you to go to where it happened and just have a little search around in the grass for a nest, because usually there'll be another pile of babies sitting there. And if mum doesn't come back, then we obviously need to scoop them up and get them into care. So we'll have a bit of a hunt around if we need them. They survive from very young. You can raise them as little pinkies and they do really well. Yes?
What looks more like a rat? Because I've got one around where I'm living.
Yep.
Is it Anticlinus?
Anticlinus, what suburb?
Oh, Gorilla, at the Gorilla caravan park.
There's a chance of it. It's probably more likely to be a bandicoot there though. Yeah, very much. There's quite a few bandicoots through there.
Right.
Is it totally brown in colour?
Yes.
Long tail or short tail?
Like a rat's tail, like that.
Yeah, probably more likely to be a bandicoot then, I reckon. So if it's got the white tip on the end of the tail, then it could be a potteroo, because you've got a few potties up there and they've got quite a rat-like face, but they do move like a little wallaby.
Sticky up ears and long
long nose will be the bandicoot, I reckon. Do you have little cone-shaped holes in the lawn?
Haven't noticed.
Have a look for them. Yeah, that'll be them if it is. So little cone-shaped holes. They eat all the corky grubs and stuff. They do a great job.
Yeah, they make my lawn really nice.
Yeah, to aerate it.
Yeah.
Alright, so bettongs and potoroos, again, we'll probably just cover these as they crop up, because look, a bettong you can pick up by the tail, potoroo, the tail's a little more flimsy, and again, they're likely to be totally incapacitated, so it'll usually just be place a towel over them. Both of them can bite, but again, it won't be too serious. So those are what they look like. So the long-nosed potoroo on the left, bettong on the right. These are our fungivores, so they're very important for spreading the fungi spores all over forests, which is like a communication network of the forest, so to speak. So yeah, very important ones to keep an eye out for. Both will usually have a white tip on the end of the tail, but only about 95% of them. So you get the odd one that doesn't. And the sort of size you're looking at is, you know, somewhere around there for them. So they're not very big, nice and light. And again, they would be transported in a Hessian bag. Because again, you can see the big feet and the little Tyrannosaurus Rex arms. Okay, means Hessian bag. Okay, straight away. Particularly for bettongs, because they just beat themselves up really, really badly. Alright, look, bats, I'm just going to touch on briefly. We will go over all this with you again if you are rescuing a bat. So we've got 8 species of microbats in Tassie. They are awesome, our bats. If you haven't, jump online and look up their faces are so funny. They're like little cartoon characters. So you look, they are everywhere. Bats, it's really crazy when you actually notice what they look like, because they're only this big. They fly past you, you just think it's a moth, you know, or a really little bird. Once you know what you're looking for, you will see them everywhere. Okay, middle of Hobart, all over the place, they're cruising about. So the thing is with bats, even though we don't have lyssavirus here or any of the nasties that have been recorded in other places, we still have to handle them all as if they have lyssavirus, just in case it ever makes its way here. Okay, so number one, you never handle them with your bare skin. Okay, it must be with like a pillowcase or a tea towel or something like that. Their teeth are very, very small, so I mean most of them couldn't penetrate the skin anyway. But even if you are scratched by one of them, we have to call the public health authority, we have to euthanize the bat, and it has to go through all these tests. So let's just avoid getting bitten by them if we can. So look, a lot of bats, I mean after these windy days, we generally have a couple coming in that just need a good feed up. They eat like a racehorse, so we feed them up and then boot them back out the door. So use your just a tea towel or a pillowcase to pop over them. You can transport them inside a pillowcase as well. Okay, you can transport them inside, but be aware that they get out of tiny little holes. So if your box isn't really secure, they will sneak out and you'll have a bat somewhere in your car for a while. Okay, so make sure you've got something nice and secure. Even something like a shoebox is fine for a bat. Just punch a couple of small holes in it and away you go from there. Okay, so bats, look, we don't mind you doing them as even your first rescues. Just be really aware of not handling them with your bare skin. So very, very safe to handle. Alright, now these animals, when the what are they called? Insurance company didn't want us to train on. It doesn't mean you won't get the opportunity to do them. It's more that our staff know that you haven't had extensive training, so they will go from the beginning at the time, so we know the information's fresh in your mind. It's really funny that devils get lumped on here when they're actually easier to handle than a possum. Much easier. They're staffies on steroids. They're hopeless. And it's really funny. The wild ones are nothing like captive ones. You know, captive ones see us as another devil, so they challenge you. They know when they do that, food appears. So look, the wild ones, you can measure their teeth, most of them, and they just go. They just sit there. You know, they're pretty good. So look, there will be chances even. Like a devil may be your first rescue. A lot of assessments of ones with facial tumour disease. So again, classic cases, they're just sitting outside a chook pen, they're starving and the smell of the chickens has brought them in there. So what we'd get you to do is again, try to get some photos if you can of the face so we can see the extent of what we're dealing with. And look, if it's really, really out of it, we'd probably get you to get a long stick and poke it a few times. And if it's not reacting to that, we may actually then talk you through how to pick it up and how to transport it, but it will just be on a case-by-case basis. I think they just didn't want us to give people the confidence to go out and start trying to catch them without that advice. Okay, and again, a lot of the devils will already be contained, so then it's a fairly straightforward one. So devils definitely transport in Hessian sacks, so you'll need one of them if you're going to do anything devil. And as for babies that are in pouches, okay, they won't bite you. So if you're rescuing young from a pouch and responding to one of them, if it's in the pouch, it won't bite. Okay, so you can go in nice and confidently. What I will say though with devils is they hold on to the teat really, really tight. So it's worth just taking a bit of vegetable oil with you, just in case we need to basically use that to slide them off the teat, because it's amazing how hard they hang on. So quolls, they're the spotty dotty ones. Again, just for them, they're very fast. So eastern quolls, most of the ones we deal with are incapacitated. So again, you can respond to it and we'll suss out whether that's a good one for you at the time. The big spotted tail quolls, they're full on. They're really full on. They're quick, they're agile, and they will have a bit of a snap at you as well. Last one of them I dealt with was an absolute ripper. Someone opened one of those big bins at Sorel that had just come from somewhere else, like the big skip bins. This quoll was obviously in there and came shooting out of there and ran straight into a cafe. Yes. So this thing was all over the place in there. It was hilarious trying to catch the poor thing, but he was okay in the end, which is good. And platypus, for them, it's the males have got a poisonous spur on their arms, which it isn't going to kill you if it gets you, but it's meant to be excruciating and generally does involve being in hospital for a little while. So quite often people's reaction is their hands and things will swell right up when they get done by them. Look, I've been on the phone to 2 people that have just ignored what I've said and tried to pick one up and have been done while they were on the phone. The one lady in New Norfolk, I can still hear the scream that came out of her mouth, and yeah, she sent me photos afterwards of her hand, and it didn't look real. It was that swollen. It was crazy. So again, with platypus assessments, they use drainways as highways. Okay, and people panic because there's one in a drain. They know exactly where they are and what they're doing most of the time. But what we often need is just someone to go there and see the drain isn't blocked to make sure it's not actually physically stuck in there. And look, if it was, then we'd make another plan, but most of them are just going to be shooting around, having lots of fun. Other times too, it might just be, like we get calls where people think they're injured and the way they scratch when they're in the water just looks very awkward. They sort of put one arm up like this and then do this, and it does look like one that's drowning, basically. But if we're called about it, we still need to go and assess it.
That's what people do.
Yeah, there's one lives down at the golf club down here, and the curator's wife said to me, "Oh, the platypus, I swear to God, it always waves at me. It sits there like this." So platypus again, we'll see if they rise. Look, I'll give you an example of the sort of way you might be able to deal with them. So there was one on Sandy Bay Road not long ago, just cruising along. Probably not the best place to be. So I happen to know that my parents were at Sandy Bay Road at that time. My dad is poop scared of animals. He's absolutely hopeless. And Mum just loves it. She'll have a crack at anything. So in that case, what we managed to do is they had 2 brooms and a plastic tub, and you just used the brooms as a wall. So as it walked, it had nowhere to go but forward. It walked into the tub off its own accord, and then they're able to transport it without even touching it. So there'll be ways like that we get around it. But again, each case is going to be different, and we'll work that out as we go. So look, obviously there's a lot of animals that we haven't trained on today, and most of them it's because it's really, really safe to handle them, and it will be as simple as saying at the time, put a towel over it and go for gold. Okay, so they're probably the main ones that we really deal with and the ones that we focus on. So just a couple of things to remember before we finish up. Number one, if you're out on a rescue, just try to remember to let us know if you're short of credit, just so we can check in. Like, we'll just set an alarm and call you every 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, just to see that everything's going okay, all that sort of jazz. Don't be embarrassed about it, just try to let us know. Would be fantastic. Now, taking notes is a really, really important part of what you do. People tend to start really well with this, and then they tend to drop off a bit, and we have to send out a reminder, and then everyone gets better again for a while. There is 3 bits of information that I'd really like you to get at every rescue that you do. Okay, now the point of this information is not for our records so much, so we've got what we needed written down. Okay, this is to go with the animal wherever it goes, so we've got a complete history of what's gone on. Okay, so if it goes to a vet or a wildlife carer, they will take this information and either transcribe it onto their sheets or staple it to that sheet, and then it goes to another carer who adds their records, and we wind up with a complete history of the animal, which can be crucial if we need to go back and call someone and say, hey, when it was next to the road, was it doing this? Okay, and if we can't get hold of that person, we don't know what we're meant to treat it with. So it can be the difference between an animal living or dying. Okay, the 3 things that you should write down. Number 1, where was the animal found? As good a location as you can, either a street address, or if there's a street sign, or if you have to use your odometer on your car to say it was 2.3 kilometres from this street. We should always be trying to release animals where they're found, because genetically it's very important, and they're used to the environment there and obviously know their way around. Okay, so if you're picking it up from somewhere, roadside or something, then obviously you can write down where you got it. If you're picking it up from a member of public, you need to get as good a details from them on where they actually found it. Okay, and jot them down. Okay, the next thing we need is the phone number and the name of whoever saw the animal injured in the site that it was injured. Okay, so once again, if it